Oh, some machine voice just announced that recording is in progress. Okay? And now the poster. Ta-da! Greetings, friends. Here it is again, early December. Hi, Tyler. And we're going to have another annual story. And I reviewed the last two annual stories, and I noticed it's always a little different. So we'll see how this one goes. So this year's story is called Wild Times. I'm sure that resonates with some of you. And our introduction is it's been a wild year for us here at Siskiyou Permaculture. Um, we had a tour of the Pacific Northwest, visited a lot of places, and then on our way back home, we found out that we needed to evacuate from Wolf Gulch Ranch because it had sold. So then we had months of wildness, of moving out of Wolf Gulch. And with a lot of help, we successfully moved out. And we're hoping to have another field station built maybe next year. And this winter looks like we'll be teaching social forestry at Lost Valley Education Center near Eugene. Hallelujah. Thank you, Lost Valley. And and so I usually start, for those of you that have been to the story before, with a homily. And if you look at this drama diet, um, you can you can kind of follow this little essay I'm going to read. It's a bit scientific. Um, this moment, a movement of physics, vectors lean to chaos. Chaos has form, but cannot be predicted. Every sentient being senses confusion, the acceleration of the rate of change. Grounding lies in the truth commons. This is a kind of a theme here this evening. A truth commons. No matter how diffuse this commons, the gifts of peripheral clues orient us, help us through the opaque, dark mirror. Time moves on. Understanding flows from cultural processes. No isolated person can be sure of leadings. To find together, gather up in patience and depth. Meditate even in solitude. Find connections. The net of truth is multi-dimensional, fluttering sparkle. I think that's called Indra's net I'm referring to there. So this is our famous drama diet poster, Venn diagram, and what it shows is multiple paths to enlightenment. And it implies a cultural process as much as a personal process. So think of it that way this evening. Our angst, the root of our angst, the root of drama, is a collective angst at the moment. We're all feeling it. And you can see all the pieces of it there. Ecological aggravation, and I'll be speaking to our personal feelings in this mess a little later. So through angst, we have one pathway to one side, which is empathy and emergency, and that leads us up to growth. Or through the other side, uh, once we get through passage breakdown, we get into melodrama, which means that we act things out, we practice, we feel through it, and that leads us into ritual, theater, and song, and up to play. And the one here in growth that's important in culture is the clown, because the clown reflects to us. The clown shows us what we may not want to look at by being so funny and following us around and things. So that's that's the drama, the sensible drama diet, which is kind of obscured at the bottom of the screen here for me here. Um, okay, so this year, 2025, started with a big snowstorm, and that caused us to have to cancel the winter camp, the annual social forestry course. And then after that, um, we published a poetry chapbook called The Shifting Forest. And it's we're going to read a poem for it in a little bit, from it in a little bit. And then we had Melanie and I went on a tour of the geophysical bioregions of the Pacific Northwest. And we visited Portland and White Salmon and Seattle and Quilcene on the Olympic Peninsula and Lost Valley near Dexter. And then on the way home, via email, we got the notice of evacuation from the ranch. The rest of the year has been wild. Packing up and distributing the whole social forestry, field camp, and library, scattered to various storage places. Whew. Be Here Now finds us with 3 tiny houses at the grandchildren's Rancho Saricetes in back of Phoenix. The field station infrastructure, we were able to move 2 buildings and collapse 2 buildings into parts and stash the parts to rebuild them later. And we are negotiating with a host farm that we hope works out. So, now I'd like the second poster, the center Venn diagram. Good. And I'm going to read this poem, the last poem in the chapbook that we published this year. It's called Advices on Attitude. Beware the overestimation of subjectivity. Headstrong, magical thinking can birth forceful enthusiasm, over application of intentions. Power without knowledge breaks and corrupts. Rather, be graceful and elegant, with timing and pacing, attentive and poised, practiced and tuned up, provisioned and sufficient, well apportioned, well to do, sheltered and enabled. Place holds us with all these clarifications, intercessions, and insights. Adjust or dissipate. Poof. So this Venn diagram is centered on place. And place is the best cultural anchor. There are cultures who have learned to move around, but I like place-based cultures because they're ecologically very knowledgeable. So good social order around sacred place has major common truths that include etiquette, how to do things, and taboos, what not to do, and coming together for discussion and meditation and celebration. And this is the truth commons, the cultural truth commons that I am looking at today in this story. All right, let's leave this up for a little bit because I want to start with the books. And I'm now going to go through the reading I did in the middle of everything that happened this year and taking notes in my black composition book. And the first book I want to talk about was published 2 years after I was born, so 1949. And this is Earth Abides by George Stewart. And George Stewart was an English professor at UC Berkeley for many decades. And he wrote a bunch of books, including Fire, Storm, Names on the Land. He's awesome. But I had never read Earth Abides. And Earth Abides is a early post-apocalyptic science fiction novel. And now, having read it, thanks to a referral from Delia Carroll, I am enlightened as to why so many post-apocalyptic science fiction novels have certain themes that are fairly consistent. So I do recommend that you go back and read Earth Abides, which starts with a pandemic. And the most recent paperback publication, printing, has a preface, an introduction by Kim Stanley Robinson. And he makes this point about how seminal, how important the foundation of Earth Abides is to a lot of our thinking. So the protagonist in Earth Abides is named Ish. Isherwood is his full name, and Ish is his nickname. And I'll bet you anything that that's directly from Ishi, the Last Man, which was written by which was an anthropological adventure of the Krobers, who were Ursula Le Guin's parents. So Ishi, the Last Man, and makes a lot of sense why both of them, both the Krobers and Stewart, teaching at UC Berkeley. So I'm making a guess there. And then Ursula Le Guin writes Always Coming Home. And it has some of the themes that George Stewart played with. Then comes The Great Bay, which I talked about a couple of years ago, Dale Pendle, which talks about the oceans rising and a great collapse of civilization and a rebirth of knowledge of sorts. So I'm just going down these books, these Pacific Northwest post-apocalyptic novels. The next one I want to mention, and I forget the author, is the Dies the Fire series. And Karen might be able to remember the author. And then the book, The Postman. Again, I can't remember the author's name, but it takes place in the Pacific Northwest and it's post-apocalyptic. And then I'm going to mention Ecotopia and Dune. And these are both Pacific Northwest, and I'll bet they were influenced by Earth Abides. And then I'm going to mention a couple of books which we have talked about before. Requiem for a People, which is the genocide of indigenous people in Southern Oregon, and Raven's Cry by Christy Harris, which is the collapse of the Haida people in the Queen Charlotte Islands. And so those two books talk about the experience of a people going through a collapse. And the conclusion from all of these post-apocalyptic science fiction novels is best know your basic skills. Mm-hmm. Like how to start a fire, bows and arrows, that sort of thing. So, um, still looking at this Venn diagram. Um, oh, wait a minute. Wrong place. Hmm. I told you this was going to be messed up. Oh, right. Three. Here it is. Yes. One of the things, this is still Earth Abides. Um, One of the things that a few of the things that George Stewart talks about that I want to point out are are one that plague survivors are traumatized and they have to regroup, and so there's a period of wondering what it means to be human and what it means for what culture is when everything stops, when there's a great cataclysm. What happens next? And he has a little fun with that. Um, and he talks about a favorite subject of mine, which is ecospasms. So when the human culture disappears, what happens? The rats take over. Other ecospasms happen, but they come under control through ecological processes. So the human world, which was thoroughly changed, slowly becomes natural again, but it goes through these ecospasms. Um, There's still persistent infrastructure after a collapse. And what humans do with that infrastructure is a really good set of storylines. So I'm just he plays with that. He has a great thing. It fits in with one of my favorite bumper stickers, which is our times right now are headed towards squat and salvage. We're going to have to make do, is the idea, after a great change takes place. And reading and research in libraries might disappear really fast. They might go away. Um, but the libraries might still be there. But what if the children don't want to read? What if that's something to think about? And he handles this pretty well because Ish wants to keep it going, and he at last realizes he can't do it by himself. And then towards the end of the book, something I'm fascinated by, uh, George Stewart does an excellent job of showing what it feels like to move into dementia. How does that go? And if you're almost like if you're the leader of this new culture, this few humans that are coming together, and you're losing your mind, what does that feel like? How does that work? And it turns out that um, the young people, often his grandchildren, learn that you pinch him. You cause the dementia person to have some pain, and they come back for a moment. I don't know if I like that or not, but I'm reporting from the book, okay? And and then you get um, how bows and arrows really work better than a lot of other things. And boy, do I see that in the Dies the Fire series and that sort of stuff. Okay, I'm now looking for sticky tab number 4. This is what I was telling you. I'm going to be going back and forth trying to find things as we move through. I know it exists. I remember seeing it. There it is. Okay. So now I'm going to go through a series of books that have to do with indigenous people of place because that's sort of our theme for the moment this evening. And the first one I want to mention is a Norton anthology of Native American poetry published in 2020, and it was edited by Joy Hario, who was the poet laureate of the United States. And I'm going to talk about her more later. And she has gone through and collected some of the best poetry from a number of different tribal peoples. And I loved it. I loved this book. And it caused me to order an expensive pile of poetry books. I didn't realize how expensive used poetry books were. But oh my gosh, what a trove of awesome stuff. Because poetry takes us through this complicated procedure of change. It lets us feel, it lets us think sideways. So poetry is really special that way. Um, and I really liked A. Scott Momaday, Against the Far Morning, John Trudell, of course, who's a great favorite of mine, James Welsh, Gail Tremblay. So um, I will return to Joy Harrow in a moment. But first, we're going to talk about Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Sweetgrass. And she also recently published The Serviceberry, Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World, which is about gifting economies. And she is now being interviewed over and over again on the radio. I hear her on NPR, I hear her on Living on Earth, and she speaks very well and went to the same college I did. She entered 2 years after I graduated. I believe she may have had the same advisor I did, Dr. John L. Morrison. Um, so uh, I'm giving a shout out to her because she's speaking so clearly and so wonderfully. And so I recommend that you visit her as you traipse through this peoples of place, this Native American poetry. Okay, that's 16, but I'm looking for 6. It's got to be here someplace. I know I'm going to find it. 9. Huh. Okay, you'll have to excuse me for being a little disorganized this year and flipping back and forth through my book. I'm going to find it sooner or later. Hmm. I hope this is amusing to you all. And 6. Here it is. Okay. So the next book, an anthropological book, is Encounters at the Heart of the World, A History of the Mandan Peoples. And this was written by Elizabeth A. Fenn, Fenn. And oh my gosh, it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And she put her personal story in it, talked about bicycling around on the upper Missouri River. So the Mandan were a settled agricultural people who were awesome traders and they were awesome agriculturalists. They grew so much food. And then all the explorers came up the Missouri River and all the beaver trappers from Canada came down to trade with them. And so the Mandan and the neighboring tribes, whose names I can't remember right now, Hitsata, something like that, um, went through collapse after collapse after collapse. And the big ecospasm that took them out were rats because their granary storages were underground and the rats know how to tunnel. So that was a big problem. And then they got hit with smallpox, and they got hit with the steamboats who were sailing up the Missouri. Guess what they did? Cut every tree they could find. And there weren't a lot of trees on the upper plains. They were only along the rivers, and that's where the villages were. And those trees, cottonwoods mostly, were very important to the architecture, to building their earth lodges. So it was insult after insult after insult. Um, and I was awfully glad to see that she mentioned on page 333 Lewis Henry Morgan, the Morgan Papers, which I learned about at DQ University in the mid 80s. He was a surveyor who talked to the Iroquois councils, the tribes, and the Haudenosaunee, and he contributed his papers to the rise of a modern American democracy, which kind of got corrupted a little bit here. So um, there's that social order thing again. How do we do it? Um, all right, moving on. Let's see. Are you ready? I'm going to do it again. I'm going to try to find seven. Do you think I can find it? I just saw eight. Okay, we've been there. We've been there. Seven. All right. So luckily, I found this book before I toured the Pacific Northwest. And this is Indians of the Pacific Northwest by Vine Deloria. And I have met Vine Deloria when he was still with us. May he be riding a good horse in the other realms at the moment. Um, and my gosh, what a clear book this is. Published in 1977. Um, and um, it's a narrative from from the tribals' perspectives of what happened around Puget Sound. And the tribes around Puget Sound had more staying power than other tribes and other stories we've heard of. However, are some very important concepts come out of this that Vine Deloria clarifies, which is there's a big difference between the the imperial concept of tribes, which is a political concept, which is based on language groups or language roots, and Athabascan, for example, and um, and that's quite different than villages. So when you're village centered, you're a people of place, and your language is specific to the drainage basin that your village is located in, or at the mouth of, in this case, at the mouth of a river, or on the lower parts of a river. And um, and I'm going to speak more to this later, but the languages differed quite a bit from village to village. And yet, when it came to treaties, the imperialists, the colonists, tried to group all these language similarities together and herd them into reservations, which didn't always work out that well. But if you read Vine Deloria, you'll find out it worked pretty well. And there's a lot of details here. We end up with gambling, small colleges, um, really good court cases that went all the way to the Supreme Court on fishing rights. Um, so this book is loaded. And the point I want to leave you with before I try to find eight is Governor Stevens, the first governor of the territory, the Washington Territory, pulled a trick. He insisted on negotiating the treaties with these collections of villages that spoke similar languages in the Chinook trading language. And the Chinook trading language is a commercial language cobbled together out of French, Russian, English, the Chinook original place language, and others. And it's dumbed down like modern English is dumbed down. And so this was a trick because then the treaties were opaque, unclear, like I was talking about in my homily earlier today. So nice work there, Governor Stevens. Good trick. I'm sure it was copied by many colonists over and over again. Um, all right. I know I saw eight before. Where is that eight? Back in a little bit. 5, 7, 8. I see it. Coming up. All right. This book was very helpful for me. And it even brought me back into my own Quaker culture. It focused me on what decolonization praxis might be like. So far I've told you about these books that I read, anthropological, about the ways that cultural genocide took place, that imperialism and colonialism did it. Now we come to a highly educated Yakima woman, and her book is called Yakima Rising, Indigenous Cultural Revitalization, Activism, and Healing. And it's a University of Arizona Press, 2013. And it's an academic treatise. She wrote it, University of Arizona, I believe. Yes, University of Arizona Press. And then, after getting her education and talking with a lot of other people from other tribal backgrounds, again, watch out for that tribal term, she went back to the Yakima Reservation in eastern Washington and started to work with decolonization as a praxis, a cultural process. And the two things that she reports on as themes are indigenous foods, relearning sacred relations to indigenous foods. And again, the social order poster is still up. We're kind of following this. And language recovery. This is what thrilled me because I have reported on another anthropological book from the Columbia Basin before, which I'm trying to remember the name of. It starts with an I. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to blow that one. It turns out there's a language lab at the University of Oregon in Eugene that helps indigenous people recover their languages. And last year I reported to you on the book flutes of fire. Um, and um, she made the very important point that I've been trying to make about how local ecological languages are village based. And then villages can talk to each other through their nearly common vocabularies. But overall, um, there's all of California has a set of symbols, designs that you see on baskets and pottery, and they have a set of word poem songs that are not exactly words. They're not words from a language. They're songs and dances, creation story dances. And all the tribes in California shared these dances, songs, and designs, patterns, even though the names for them were highly varied. And California has a very, very complex language map. Um, so um, that's that's so important to to understand that getting your language back helps you become connected to place again and reorients the people to the ecological tending that has gone on for thousands of years. And it's very healing. And it helps recover from cultural shame and trauma brought on by having your language taken from you, having your clothing taken from you, being moved from your traditional village and place, forced migration. So, this, in fact, happened to my Quaker ancestors. I myself, in school in the 50s and 60s, was criticized for speaking plain speech. They tried to take my language from me. They didn't like that I wore very simple clothes. They wanted me to become a modern and to compete. And so I've been through a bit of this, and I'm realizing that studying back, getting plain speech back, would help with the truth comments that I keep talking about, that I keep mentioning this time. So um, this really thrilled me, and I highly recommend it, even though it's a very academic treatise. And I'm looking forward to learning more about decolonization praxis. How do we do this? How do we actually pull this off? So, okay, what was the last one I just did? Eight? Was it eight? Yes, it was eight. So now I need nine. I'm going around. I didn't see it up front, but I think it is. Six, 10. Huh. All right, hold on. I'm working on this. This has been a wild year, like I said. Eight. Where are you hiding, nine? I know you're here. Sorry about this. And hiding behind three, we find nine. Yay! Okay, I'm going to move to this kind of wrapping wrapping up the people of place, indigenous. Um, and I'd like to move the poster to that note, that rough note, discernment, discretion, and restraint that Karen took a photo of. So here comes our third illustration of the evening. And we're back talking about Joy Harrow, who I mentioned earlier with the Norton Anthology of Native American Poetry. And this is her poetry book, Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, and poems. And this was 2015, Norton again. And it's awesome. I love this poetry book. It's so cool. And my friend Bob from the Quaker meeting has listened to the audio version of it where she actually sings and maybe even plays a saxophone. So the audio version is highly recommended. And her poetry is a poetic response to tragedy. And she just loves the saxophone. It just speaks to her condition. To use, there it is. There's that. There's our next cultural poster. And she's talking about in her poetry how to speak in a collective voice, to speak with your people, not for your people, but with the voice of your people. And this is hard for us to understand in a colonized, hyper individualistic, consumer, collapsing, imperial, whatever. And so I was really impressed with that. It just kept jumping out at me in her poetry. Learn cultural skills. These are the conflict resolution suggestions for holy beings, which is all of us. Tell inclusive stories, stories that bring us all into the story. Celebrate survival. Whatever survival you've got, just dance with it. Go with it. And do not forget your people's stories. It's stories that's so important. I have mentioned in previous talks how indigenous languages or place-based languages are collections of stories. They're not collections of words. So when you hear those languages, they're phrases. They're collections of phrases. And Quaker Plain speech is like that. You say a phrase like walk in the light, and you're referring to a story. And so you give a clue. And so you end up trading stories. And that's a whole different dimension of language. You get to understand things in a whole different way. And you keep getting tied back to place and how important that is. So now I'm going to jump to complete something from last year. And hi, Zachary. Nice to see you here. And so I have two books that I found on assignment from Zachary. One of them is called The Book of Runes by Ralph Bloom, a handbook for the use of an ancient oracle, I think. And it's the Viking Press Oracle Books, and it has some good charts in the back. So it turns out that those of us from Northern Europe have something similar to the California language map, which is a set of common symbols, even though the names of them might differ from language to language. And those are the runes and the Ogham marks, Ogham. And so, for example, the Druid, once they graduated from the teaching college in the trees, the Kadkado, the Battle of the Trees, the tree alphabet, would receive a staff carved with the Ogham marks, and they would be tactile. So if you've ever been to Portland and you've been to I think it's the Japanese garden, you see worry stones so that you touch something and it helps your thinking. And so the carvings of the Ogham marks on the staff helps with the memorization of huge amounts of knowledge. The Epic of the Trees, which is completely ecological and place-based for Northern Europe. So that's the book, The White Goddess by Robert Graves that I've mentioned before. And so then the second book I found that also helps with us recovering our language, decolonizing ourselves from the Roman Empire, perhaps. I mean, how far do you want to go? But we are all of us as settlers, and all of us as colonized and displaced peoples, for decolonization praxis, to recover our language. I'm trying to give us some traction here. Okay. How can we start? How can we get moving back? So, the second book I want to mention is Tree Wisdom by Jacqueline Memory. Really? It looks like Memory Patterson. Jacqueline Patterson. The definitive guidebook to the myth, folklore, and healing power of trees. And it's HarperCollins, 1996. And the chart on page 339 compares the modern alphabet, which I guess is a Greek Roman alphabet, and the old names, the runes, the Oghams, the Ogham marks, and the trees. So this is great. And then she goes off on tree by tree and the essays on the trees. So with those two books, the Book of Runes and Tree Wisdom, we can start to um, re-understand what ecological knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge we still carry in our settler languages, which have been, as I said earlier today, degraded. So Quaker Plains speech still has pronoun structure, phraseology, that sort of thing. So there's your clues. All right. Now we're looking for 11. I can see it. 11's right there. What did I do for 11? Oh my. Okay. So in order to live within our means and to care for place, to tend for place, in order as settlers to learn who we are, we need culture. We can't do it. We can't buy it at a market. It's not something we can consume. We have to build it together. And we have to do it first and foremost with an absolute dedication to place, to tending place. And thus, that list of words, discernment, which means finding the truth commons. That, as I said, can only be done together as a cultural process. Discretion, knowing when to shut your mouth and to be careful. So discretion, not in the modern consumer constellation, shall we say. Restraint. Restraint, actually not do something, like hesitate? What? What am I talking about? Restraint? That's a cultural process. We need to help each other to practice restraint. We don't need everything that we're told we need. We need each other and we need place. And if we can learn discernment, discretion, and restraint through cultural processes and through the repetition of stories, we become more resilient and we start to be able to think about the future and thus practice these cultural skills so that we feed the 7 generations after us. So that's where I was going with that. Now, the next 2 books that I'm going to talk about are Deep Adaptation and Collapse. And this is the movement mostly in Britain, which is called Extinction Rebellion. And deep adaptation is a little different. And on my talk this summer, as we moved around, I was trying to make a visual of how, with deep adaptation, we understand that collapse is inevitable, collapse is certain, disaster is probable, extinction is possible. And to accept that short story, that phrase that I just used, is very difficult because it's shocking. It's understanding that we're in free fall. And Jem Bendell and Rupert Reed, who wrote Deep Adaptation, Navigating the Realities of Climate Chaos, 2021, Polity Press, they disagree with each other, the 2 authors. Jem Bendell goes for, we really need to get real, go for deep adaptation, and the potential rewards are a kind of a centering, an emotional adjustment that leads us to be able to speak to the commons of truth, the truth commons. And Rupert Reed is saying, without hope, without some investment in a political process, people are going to be very at wits' ends. They're going to be in really big trouble. They're going to be in over their heads. What are we going to do for them? How are we going to, you're going to give up hope of some kind of a process of transition? So there's transition and there's adaptation. And those are the 2 words that contrast with each other. So transition believes in a process and it runs on hope. And adaptation runs on a acceptance, a release of hope. Very difficult to understand this. The image they give is what we're doing right now, holding both transition and adaptation in mind, is stand on 2 horses, 1 foot on each horse, riding 2 horses at once. I've seen this done in a circus. It's not easy, but it's a great image. We're riding 2 horses at once right now. That's part of the confusion that I opened with in my opening homily. What the heck? So some of the words they use, the 4 R's, similar to my little poster: resilience, relinquishment, restoration, reconciliation. Those are the 4 R's. And escape from certainty, includes getting rid of entitlement, surety, control, autonomy, progress, exceptionalism. So, whoa, they're really giving us a mindful here. What a challenge that we have to get ready for adaptation. And he shows in all kinds of charts with all kinds, this is a Jem Bendel, that we've been in free fall since 2016. Now, this fits right in with Limits to Growth, Donella Meadows and crew, which I've spoken about before. We're right on schedule. We have blown through all these limits of the planet. We're in free fall. And my suggestion, as per that list of words we had up for a while, is place-based restoration. Tending is the most human thing we can do and the most healing thing we can do, both for our culture building, for our ecological stability or resilience, and for ourselves. Although when we start talking about individuals too much, we very quickly move into a whole bunch of consumer stuff. So let's be careful about that. So I'm going to move on. I'm wondering what my time is. Oh, not too bad. Okay, now we're going to move on to 12. And this is Jem Bendel coming back again after deep adaptation with a book called Breaking Together, a freedom-loving response to collapse. So apparently he picked up some, oh God, what do they call that? It's a political movement. Libertarianism. Thanks. Yeah, libertarianism. Because he's trying to help. He's trying to give us some kind of transition. But boy, does he lay it out. The evidence of collapse since 2016 and ongoing. And it is sobering. And his introduction is worth it just to read the introduction. It was published in 2023 by the Schumacher Institute. And if you need convincing that we're in free fall, that we're in collapse, go ahead and read the first half of the book. If you want to move on to what we might do about it, and he says this at the end of his introduction, read the second half of the book. So I'm still reading the second half of the book. This is a shocking perspective. It offers get real bennies. Yeah, nice. Thanks, Jem. Nice. Jem Bendel is trying to help us out while he tries to tell a truth that might become a common truth if we dedicate ourselves to culture building, decolonization, praxis, and place. Okay, we're going to move on. And now I'm going into the catch-all at the end of my list of books. I'm going to go through fairly quickly a few different books here that I've also been reading. And the first one is called The Arrow Over the Door by Joseph Bruchac, who's Abenaki. And that was published in 1998 by Penguin Books. And it's a young reader's book. It's a middle school book. And it is about my precise ancestors. It starts out on Fish Creek. My mother's name was Fish. And it talks about the Quakers during the Revolutionary War when they refused to bear arms or contribute to the very chaotic mix of language groups, what they call tribes, and and the French and the English and the colonists on both the loyalist side and the revolutionary side. And the Quakers were like in the middle of all of this. And so they gathered at Easton Meeting, which my ancestors, some of my ancestors might have been at this meeting, and a group of Abenaki warriors um, entered the meeting house after feeling the peace there, sensing no war, no weapons. And the two peoples, the Algonquian speaking Abenaki people and the plain speech speaking Quakers, got along fabulously. And uh, the meeting house was marked as a place of peace, and the Abenaki War Party gave up working for the English and went back to their villages in French Quebec. So I was thrilled to find that book of 250 years ago. I have had I have had other contact with Abenaki people, and my people, South Glens Falls Meeting, the Eastern Quarter, um, still carry treaty obligations. We are friends with tribes for centuries. And I love that. I love that thread. Years ago, I talked about the book um, Shell Game by Jerry Martien that mentions some of the Quaker adventures. All right, we're moving on to 14. All right, so now this is called Wild Girls. How the Outdoors Shaped the Women Who Challenged a Nation. And it's written by Tia Miles, Tiya Miles, Miles. And I believe we're talking Harvard here. Um, and it's 2023 Norton, W.W. Norton Publishing again. And this is fabulous book. It reminds me so much of my dearly departed Elizabeth, a wild girl for sure. Pony Girls. It reminds me of Pony Girls a lot. And and we're talking Harriet Tubman, who was an awesome naturalist, who really knew her way in the woods. So place-based again. Ecologically sensitive and knowledgeable people, even though she was basically a settler. Slaves can be settlers? Someone should talk to me. Okay. Um, and then Louisa May Alcott, who was an out of control wild girl with Thoreau and all those others at Walden Pond. She was there at Walden Pond. So she knew her woods. She knew her wildness and brought it into her work and brought it into her wonderful stories later in her life. Um, then there's the Fort Shaw girls, who are indigenous tribal peoples. And they were basketball whizzes in 1904. No one could touch them. And it was because they were wild girls. They were good in the woods and they knew how to move. And they played all these demonstration games. It was amazing. And then there's Zitkala Sa. And I don't remember that one right now, but it's in the book. And there's Dolores Huerta, who was the labor organizer. And she was a wild girl raised in the woods. And then there's Octavia Butler, One of my favorites in post-apocalyptic science fiction, and I'm sorry I forgot to put her on that list where I started. I believe Octavia Butler was definitely influenced by George Stewart and Earth Abides. I can see it in her work. And of course, that would be appropriate, right? Read the stuff that you came up with. Get with the program. So, um, this is so great that girls and non-binary kids, that would have been me, um, are not gender coded in the same way. And they learn directly from nature because they're not being held close by the school systems that they're in. Um, and that natural places are relatively general neutral characteristics. Greater flexibility and creativity comes from being a wild girl or a wild non-binary person. So that was thrilling. And again, I heard it first as an interview on NPR, maybe even on Living on Earth. I think I did hear it on Living on Earth. You might be able to track down that interview. So that was awesome. I was so thrilled to find that book. Um, Highly recommended, as you can tell. Okay, and then I believe this is no two more. So I discovered out of British Columbia from 1990 the new Catalyst bioregional series, and I was able to trace some of them down. And the one that I found most importantly is called Turtle Talk, very place based. So back to my place thing. Turtle Talk, Voices for a Sustainable Future. And it includes Gary Snyder, my most important poetry mentor, Starhawk, ever heard of her? Hmm? Peter Berg, oh yeah, I know these people. Um, Dave Foreman, hmm. And Murray Bookchin. The only one of these that I have not met is Murray Bookchin. The others, I know. I've met them. So that was thrilling to see what they had to say in 1990. That's 35 years ago. And they nailed it. They were totally on the program. And that was a shock, right? I mean, it's good to go back and see, oh, we've known this all along, and voices have been speaking. This message is nothing new. Let's understand this. Let's get this. So it's interviews, wisdom, and it has a couple of indigenous views included, whose names I can't return to, but it also includes Carolyn Estes from Alpha Farm talking about consensus and British Columbia tribal indigenous views. And Gary Snyder's essay is Don't Move, Stay in Place. And so thrilling, absolutely thrilling for me to dig up a treasure like this from the archives, from deep in the archives. And then I do believe it's true. I'm going to make sure, but I believe this is the last book today, number 16, and this is Witches, Witch Hunting, and Women by Sylvia Federici. And she also wrote Caliban and the Witch. But this is a newer version of that, 2018, by PM Press in Oakland, California. And it's an easier read than Caliban and the Witch. And her very important point is that the rise of capitalism was not possible without the witch trials, and that the witch trials were actually economic warfare against the market ladies, because the early traders and the early cities people, men, liars and thieves, to quote the Trickster series, um, they could not compete with the market ladies. The market ladies had network, knowledge, um, gifting, a lot of different types of currency, great deal of flexibility, and oh my gosh, the trader trickster guys were up against it, and so they went to war against women, and they made up an excuse which we learn as witchcraft. So I recommend this whole different thing. Land must be developed. We must get the wild girls out of the woods. All this is very old, and it has to do with our ancestors, because as settlers, as European, my ancestors, settlers as Europeans, here trying to become people of place, boy, do we have deep story of our own removals, of our own colonization, of our own trauma. It's big, it's huge. We're still dealing with it. And there's fairy tales, and there's songs, and there's story, and there's. So I hope I've given you some threads here to pull on, to seek through, to walk through while you dig in. Because we as I said at the beginning, I'm interested in this truth commons, and I see it as a cultural process, and I see that cultural process only being effective if it is place-based, and it starts with a decolonization praxis. And that decolonization praxis is going to be different for all of us. But when we come together and we find this continuity, we find these parallels. Like, it was so thrilling for me to read the Yakima Rising and realize that it was pertinent to my own Hicksite Quaker colonization, cultural destruction. I am a refugee here from my homeland, where my people have lived for 400 years on the Vermont border. We were rubbed culturally. And boy, was my high school a mess because of that. So that's a whole nother story, but maybe we'll tell that someday. Um, it is necessary to enslave a workforce and to effect labor discipline in order to accumulate wealth. And we are now in that situation where the divide is happening, and the elite want to hold on to their status by relegating the commons, and I don't just mean the human commons, by relegating the commons to slavery and serfdom. And you can feel it. You can see that's what the program is. And our resistance to that colonization, I believe, let me repeat, must be place-based and cultural and language recovery. A lot of modern languages, Japanese, English, have lost their roots. The language itself got captured, got turned to a commercial purpose. So I'm hoping this was uplifting. I I was intending to bring some joy and some light today to this storytelling, and and I suppose I sure feel it. I was uplifted by reading these books and seeing how they all fit into each other. So here's my wrap. Don't take it too personally when they blame you as an individual for poor choices. It's not our problem. It's a systems problem. It's the system we should be talking about, not the players. This is difficult to understand. This, by blaming individuals for their choices and listening to the news in the last couple of days, um, that blinds us to systems failures. Nobody's talking about the failure of systems. They're blaming individuals. That's a problem because that leaves us all eligible for shaming. And that's trauma. That's a process of colonization. Blame. And it is not our fault. It's something much bigger, and everybody's tangled up into it, including the elites. So Tainter said in an interview, which I mentioned in a previous story, that complexity demands more complexity until the costs exceed the returns, and then you have collapse. And this is happening in the medical industry. It's happening in all industries. It's happening in the energy industries. The cost of production exceeds the ability for profits to return. Even the private equity firms are failing to show profit now. They can't force, and thus the higher entities of economy are trying to force efficiency onto us. So Ashland Hospital is being closed. Now they want us to drive to Medford. Then they'll want us to drive to Eugene. Then they'll want us to drive to Portland. That's called externalizing costs, dumping it on the user. So there you are again. Oh, that was your personal choice. Too bad you made a bad choice. Blame and shame. Forget it. So, um, this brings us to a situation where services shrink to dense urban hubs in an attempt to preserve efficiency, so called, or profit. And what you see is since there's no traditional way to make money, the stock market, private equity, whatever, you see gambling. Now you see gambling. Now you see gaming. This is what's going on. At the end, this is collapse. We're in free fall. Systems are eating systems. We're along for the ride. Attempts to hold previous lifestyles that maybe we had become accustomed to demands more and more work and expense. Collapse is scary, as I said, talking about Jim Bendel. Eviction, inflation, the loss of tools. Poof, they're gone. I'm sorry, you have to move on. Keep moving, keep moving. What library? What box of tools? Move along, move along. We have jobs for you. The elites, as I said earlier, are demanding slavery to support their status. The losers have less choices. So that's another way to put it. Ambitious individuals increasingly find isolation and precarity. Our best hope is culture building, and it's hard. Decolonization practice is not easy. The first thing you need to do is change your language, how you speak, how you determine what truth is, how you understand where you are, and what your relationship, our relationship is to place. Allegiance to place invests in the future. So there we are. It's really hard for me as an elderly person who's just gone through a wild year to separate my own sense of precarity from a sense of craziness, of systems failure, of collapse, and necessity for adaptation. It's very difficult for us on our own, and I'm including myself, to separate those things. But I'm bringing you this message because at least I have continuous culture. At least I have the possibility of recovering plain speech. So that gives me something to do. That's decolonization praxis. This is what I hope to do with what time I have left. And I want all of you to dodge blame and shame. It's not your fault. Systems are unfolding, collapsing, and failing all at once. We don't even know what this means. And like I said in my opening homily, chaos has form, shape, rhythm, rhyme, and harmony, but it cannot be predicted. We're along for the ride. And right now, according to Jim Bendel, that ride is two ponies, 1 foot on each pony. Good luck with that. I'll be there with you. Any questions? We could have some discussion now. But I think I did my job. Another annual story. Yay. Okay. Um, Want to take a deep breath? Wiggle a little bit. Touch the earth. Take another deep breath. I hope you get this reading. It was good for me. I really enjoyed all this reading. Any comments? You
Hey,
can
Hazel.
unmute yourself.
I had a question.
Hi,
I'm
Cash.
curious. Hey, Hazel. I had a question around the joy that you're feeling, and I wondered if you could t share a little bit about what you get out of telling stories and share a bit from your experience just now.
I I I think it's that sense of the possibility of there being a truth commons. That phrase I made up for tonight's story. It tickles me. It has, remember that phrase I used at the beginning, something about glitter. um, so sparkling glitter, right? Um, yeah. Now that's different than story. You just listened to a story. Undoubtedly, listening to stories is more powerful than reading. I experienced this as a child in the Adirondacks. I loved the stories around the campfire. But nonetheless, this is what I have access to now. This is what I know how to do. I can read. And thus I'm recommending, well, we have this. Here's these sources. And that makes me happy, right? Oh, we've got something. We can work on this. That's good news. Did I answer your question or did I dodge?
I think you answered it. It was a slight dodge, but it
Yeah.
was great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes. Anybody else?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Sharon Circle. I don't haven't been I'm just I've this is the third time I've been to your storytelling, but I haven't been a part of this community specifically. Um, but I want to comment on just hearing the name Murray Bookchin was quite a throwback for me because I actually did get to meet him and went to his Institute for Social Ecology. I think it was back in 85.
Uh,
And that was I actually took a permaculture course then. Yeah. Using the first Bill Mollison book. So it just, yeah, I haven't been able to actively do permaculture now, but it's a part of me and has always been for since I was 20. So thank you.
yeah, that essay by Murray Bookchin in Turtle Talk, the new Catalyst series, was great. I'm glad to check in with that again.
Yeah, and I remember hearing a talk from his and just I went to bed feeling feverish because of just his description of collapse and how, like you said, that the um, systems eat systems
Yeah,
and just getting that. Yeah. So thank you.
yeah. May you have wonderful dreams tonight. Okay. Anybody else?
You should go,
Comment?
Kelsey. I saw your hand before.
I,
I just wanted to say, Hazel, I loved what you said about the Ogham and the runes being touchstones to deeper information. It's like a trail marker, that you can touch and let flood in this knowing. And just how on theme this has been for me lately of truth and how important truth is. And when we can find those who speak the truth and are able to speak the truth, how refreshing and what a touchstone that is. So thank you for speaking to that. It was really exciting.
thanks, Kelsey. Nice. Someone else?
Hey, Hazel. It's good to be
Hey,
with you.
hi, Kirsten.
Um, I'm thinking about the different archetypes and tools that we have to work with in this multi-generational thread that we're holding right now, currently, as all of us being alive, in the work of repatterning and remembering pre-colonial roots of our own ancestry, and also fusing with our context now. So finding a way of being. You mentioned clearly I'm a fan of the clown and the jester archetype. I'm curious, you said that it can be a mirror, which I've come to find and why I feel drawn towards that as a archetype and a tool to orient towards in these ways of remembering and grieving and healing and how humor is metabolism as well. But beyond humor, I'm curious if you can maybe speak a little bit more to that or other archetypes that you feel are important to identify as allies, maybe, in some of this work that is very complex.
Big question. Um, I think there are appropriate humors and inappropriate humors.
Mm.
Okay, so sardonic, sarcasm, mm-mm. Irony, uh-huh. Absurdity, you betcha. Okay, reflection. So these, I think, are all the qualities of a good clown. A clown can play things out in a way that is inclusive and doesn't use blame and shame as its tool.
Mm.
And so let's be very careful with our humor because there's a lot of bad humor out there. There's a lot of blame and shame. And instead, we can be more subtle and more creative. And since the clown comes up in so many cultures and it's so effective, the clown both contributes by creating a whole new experience, like just out of nothing, or it reinforces. The clown imitates bad behavior, uh, expands it, magnifies it, makes it real obvious, and everybody cracks up laughing because they're all included. That's part of irony. Irony is inclusive. It's telling a story. Oh my goodness, isn't this ironic? We're all in the same boat. So, so that's the clown work. That's the humor work. It is getting into that, uh, making it fun, uh, finding something that tickles us. Like for me, it was finding that Wild Girls book. I was like, yes. I was like, okay, non-binary kids in nature. Okay, I can relate to that. Fun. So there it is, a little something. But you asked a big question there. I think you should like do a cartoon strip or something, maybe an illustrated book or that
Okay, I
has a,
will.
a whole parcel of clowns in
I gotta ask big questions to you and just see what comes out. It's like a Hazel snow globe or something. See where the dust goes.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Comments? Questions?
Hi, I have a question. My name's Nori. We met very briefly this summer in White Salmon. I live
Oh,
out at Coney where Susan works.
oh yes.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you so much for a beautiful story. Um, I have a question about the periphery, and it's not like a direct question, but more just I'm wondering if you could speak to us a little bit about this piece of looking to the periphery for answers. And this time of year, I get to spend most of my days tending the forest, and we're doing a lot of fuels reduction work and working our way towards controlled burns. And we have a lot of pine beetle. We have mostly pot. Sorry that my camera moves, by the way. I haven't figured out how to turn off the setting. So it's just like a little bit of a roller coaster. Um, but so we have a lot of pine beetle and our ponderosa pines. We have these white oaks. And the forest is changing so rapidly. I feel like every season I'll notice a patch where some pines go. And in the section that we're at, um, it's a lot of figuring out of like, okay, like who stays and who goes, and how can we make decisions to move and tend to the forest and figure out how to act in a way that really honors how the forest is already trying to go to adapt to a changing earth instead of like fitting our picture. I feel like it's the hope instead of like the transition adaptation, like how to, instead of fitting our picture of how it should look, how to really listen to how the forest wants our hands to tend. And so I feel like looking to the periphery is the best tool I have right now to do that, and taking those moments of calm and still to yeah, like ask the periphery for guidance. And I was just wondering if you could speak more to that, and like when you say periphery, yeah, just like what that is for you.
Noticing. That's the word I use in the book over and over again. Did you notice? And in order to notice, First, you need a lot of knowledge. And then you see something that doesn't fit into your knowledge base. And that's peripheral to your knowledge.
Mm.
And so it sparkles and glitters. And often, it's like you see it to the side. That's peripheral, right? Oh, what was that? What did I just see? So one of the things for me that was peripheral after the heat dome of June 2021, the scorching event, is that pines, cedars, and firs thinned out through mortality to a stocking rate that probably was close to what it was when regular burning was taking place.
Mm.
So that was a peripheral observation on my part. I just happened to notice, oh, we're down to 5 big pines per acre. All the others die. Oh, this is deep. There's something going on here more than I understand. And oh, there's so much in what you said. There's mother trees who send nutrients to some trees and borrow nutrients from other trees. So, did the trees hold counsel? Is that peripheral knowledge? How did this ecological decision come out so well? And what's happening to the carbon now? All this, all this extra carbon, where's it falling? So there's so much to try to notice. And it's based on our limited knowledge. We have some knowledge. I mean, luckily, I've actually cruised through the woods you're talking about. I've been there. And it's very similar to the oak pine savannas I've been working in. So decisions can be made by humans to make little changes that are appropriate. And whoa, it'd probably be good if you took it to council. I think I saw this out of the corner of my eyes. Did anybody else? And is it actionable? Is there something we can do here? And certainly it's how many snags per acre? How many logs can we get in ground contact? What's the orientation of those logs? What happens next? What do we do to get fire back? So in all of those questions, there's a great deal of sensitivity that's necessary, and we're not fully prepared because we don't have the story base that's place based. I loved it. I went to a friend of mine sent me a link to a fisheries nonprofit up in Puget Sound, and right at the top of their uh, front page on their web page, it said, if you want to do restoration work in drainage basins that flow into Puget Sound, you'd better have the indigenous people on board or you'll make mistakes because you are missing important parts of the knowledge base, and thus you're not sensitive to what you need to notice peripherally. So there's two things there. One is stories, or several things there. One is stories of place, trying to understand what are the coyote stories about. Then there's scientific knowledge. What's going on here to the best of our ability? Like the beetles aren't killing trees. The trees are stressed out. They're already on their way out. The beetles are just undertakers. They're helpers. Is that a peripheral observation? And yes, now there's been scientists who have tested that out. And by gum, the beetles are selecting for the appropriate genetics for a warmer climate coming to your place soon. So, who's doing the work here? Did you notice who's doing the work here? And is it work that we didn't understand was work? And is that peripheral knowledge that there are players here that we're not giving enough credit to? So how do we dance that? Where do we get that pattern? How do we sing the songs that all sentient beings know? We do it by being there and by opening up and by learning. And this is something in the Quaker meeting I've been trying to get across. We can't get cultural knowledge as individual consumers. We first have to reform as settlers cultures of place and learn enough about our own cultural process of becoming people of place before we talk to previous cultures of that place. We will not be prepared and will be wasting the time of indigenous cultures of place if we don't do our own cultural work first. And that's what I talked about tonight. Language, pattern, and that wonderful list, harmony, rhythm, all those things, all those musics. And out of music comes harmonies. Sometimes those harmonies are overtones. Overtones are peripheral. All right, I'm not poetic there, but there's something, a few clues.
Thank you very much. I'm really grateful to, yeah, hear the story to that. Thank you.
Yeah. Who are the epic entities on that landscape? And it's Screech Owl, the Propertius Dusky Wing, and Acorn Woman, Spirit. The oaks are the culture with the most implication. So we need to know the oaks, especially the white oak. And that's well known in many cultures all over the Northern Hemisphere. Over and over again, you find the stories, the best stories, they're all about the white oak. And yes, that's what you've got. And all those pines and all those Douglas firs, they were not there when there was regular burning. They're an artificial forest. They are a colonized forest, allowed to grow for extractive purposes. Ooh, so much to learn, so much truth. Let's get together where we are and try to understand these things. And go for walks, pilgrimages, over and over again, the same pilgrimage to the same sacred place, over and over again. And did you notice? Something was different this time. Did you hear that? What was that? Who's new? Who just came through? The long-eared owl? Oh my gosh. So, there you go. A few clues to the best of my ability. But yeah, it's nice stuff to be, it's nice stuff to be people of place grounded, and then have magic happen, to notice magic. Then you got glitter and sparkle. Mm. All right. Anybody else? Yes, Barbara.
Well, this might not be a profound contribution. I do want to thank you so much for the inspiration. And I'm out here in a neighborhood where I'm surrounded by the new and very old extractive kinds of and hostile kind of force. Very when we took that's not what I was sure course in Ashland at Jackson Well Springs. You and I sort of argued about who was the eldest one, and um and so here we are, and I'm so really, it's so heartwarming to see so many young people and so eloquent and knowledgeable and determined and dedicated. It's beautiful. So what is our place? And my other thing is here, I'm sort of isolated out here in Applegate, but I have my work on a stream instead of a forest, and I have the oak trees and the owls. But how do we make connections? Do we do our work and things will come? Do, do we? Do you offer gatherings where we can renew our faith in the future and in the forest? Does any of that make sense? In other words, community doesn't just happen. I have a community here of animals and plants, and I'd like more people involved. So that's the current status.
Thank you, Barbara. You were broken up quite a bit, so get
Oh,
a
dear.
better internet connection.
Okay, I will do my best.
I'm interested in assisted migration. So, as elders, we might do that crazy thing, which is plant a tree. Make those kinds of investments that are really long range. And that's really nice. I've seen those stories. I've seen those advices over and over again from many different cultures. When you're an old person, plant a tree. And so I'm thinking gray pines. Let's start moving gray pines north.
Really?
Yeah, let's get those gray pines north. And that fits right in. We're the gray ones and we're planting the gray pines. And they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. And we make jewelry from the seeds, and they were given a bad name and they were not respected. So they're right there with us. That's our elder tree. So I'm taking that as my icon for assisted migration and becoming people of place by planting gray pines north. So that's what I'm doing. Yay. Lovely. Okay. We're pretty much there. Anybody else have a comment or a question?
Hazel, I just want to clarify a little bit, and you can tell me if this is what you were saying, Barbara, but I think some of her question too was about how to connect with other communities doing this work. Yeah. That it just can be yeah, do you wait for the people to come or how do you do that?
Well, I said first you form your own culture of place, then you talk to other cultures of place. It's kind of a funny chicken and egg thing to say, right? Um, how do you do that, Hazel? I've been recommending Salon. You've heard me talk about that. It's a free-form conversation that develops trust without an agenda. And then out of that culture building through art and sharing emerges doable things. It's emergent properties of complexity. First, you build the cultural complexity, the cultural richness, I would rather call it. And then out of that comes work, the work. And you know, I'm referring to my Quaker background when I say things like that. You sit in silence until the whole group is moved. And then you have what's called a gathered meeting. And out of that gathered meeting comes a leading. And then you take that leading to clearness committee with the other elders. And you find the resonance of that leading in the traditional stories. And then you feel the strength and the gift to move on that leading, to move with that leading. And then you create a testimonial of the experience. And then you share that testimony through epistles. And epistles are letters written by culture to other cultures or to other places. So there's my short version of, based on Hicksite Quakerism. That's what I've got, right? So I share that. Okay.
Hazel,
Anybody else?
the barred owl just whoo out in Western Massachusetts here just said hello.
They talk. They talk a lot, those barn owls. We're hearing them out here now too, quite a bit. So, yeah. White salmon. Man, they mobbed us. Boy, were they talkative. So, thank you for that. Yeah. We just heard from a barred owl on the other side of the continent. Have we got it? We're good? It's been a delight, friends. Walk in the light. There's an ocean of darkness, but over the ocean of darkness is an ocean of light. Walk in the light. Be well, friends. Hopefully, we'll see you next year at the next annual story or at one of our events. Sign up for our newsletter. Love you all. See you soon.
Thank you, Hazel.
Happy trails to you until we meet again.
Thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Melanie.
Melanie and Karen. Yes.